We are in a trillion-dollar war right now, and it's not about oil. It's not about land. It's not even about semiconductors. It's about 17 strange-sounding elements that most people can't pronounce but absolutely cannot live without. This war is being fought inside our iPhones. Inside Tesla's electric motors. Inside wind turbines spinning across the North Sea. Inside America's most advanced fighter jets and China's newest hypersonic missiles. Where is the battlefield? The supply chain of rare earth elements. And right now, one country has a grip on this industry so tight that it makes OPEC look like a neighborhood gas station. That country is China. And if you think this is just about trade or minerals, think again. That is about who controls the future of technology, military power, green energy, AI infrastructure, and the entire industrial backbone of the 21st century. Welcome to the quiet trillion-dollar war you've probably never heard of, fought for the invisible engine of modern life. When we hear rare earths, it sounds like something out of a Marvel movie. But here's the plot twist: they're not actually rare. The 17 rare earth elements, including neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, lanthanum, and yttrium, are relatively abundant in the Earth's crust. The problem isn't scarcity. The problem is processing. Rare earth ores are mixed with radioactive material. Separating them requires complex chemical treatments, toxic waste ponds, and expensive infrastructure. It's dirty, capital-intensive, and politically controversial. Which is exactly why most Western countries gave up on it. But before we get into that mistake, let's understand why these elements matter so much. Neodymium and dysprosium are critical to the production of high-strength permanent magnets that power electric vehicle motors, wind turbine generators, drones, precision-guided missiles, F-35 fighter jets, robotics and industrial automation, to name a few. Without rare earth magnets, we don't achieve high torque in compact spaces. Without that, electric vehicles become inefficient, wind turbines produce less power, and modern weapons lose precision. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, the F-35 contains hundreds of kilograms of rare earth materials. The U.S. military needs tons of rare earth elements for every Virginia-class submarine, every advanced radar system, every satellite, everything literally that keeps the war machine operating. They're everywhere. Without rare earth materials, the U.S. Department of War will become the Department of Silence. And here's the uncomfortable part: from 2020 to 2023, before China controlled the supply of those elements, about 70% of U.S. rare earth imports came directly from China, and a large part of the remaining 30% was indirectly sourced from China as well. That is why Donald Trump was eager to meet Xi Jinping in South Korea several months ago. We've talked about rare earths in many videos, but we need to spend more time on them, as they're one of the very few things that can force the U.S. to lower its arrogant head. And China is the only country that can strangle America's throat. Mining is the first but least important part of the story. China accounts for nearly 70% of global rare earth mining output. But the real dominance is downstream. China handles nearly 90% of the global rare earth processing capacity. Beijing controls over 90% of magnet manufacturing capacity. The country also dominates the world's refining of heavy rare earths. So mining is step 1, refining is step 2, and magnet manufacturing is step 3. China controls all three. That's not market leadership. That's vertical integration on a geopolitical scale. How China built the monopoly is a long story. Back in 1992, during a visit to Inner Mongolia, Deng Xiaoping made a statement that sounded almost poetic. The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths. At the time, nobody in Washington took that seriously. But China did. The turning point was a place called Bayan Erbia Mining District, the largest rare earth deposit in the world. Over the next 3 decades, China poured state funding into extraction, processing facilities, research institutes, and magnet manufacturing. Meanwhile, the United States had its own rare earth giant, the Mountain Pass mine. In the 1980s, Mountain Pass was the world's leading producer. Then came environmental lawsuits, wastewater leaks, rising costs, and tightening regulations. Production slowed. Investment dried up. Western firms saw rare earths as dirty, low-margin commodities. China saw them as strategic leverage. By the early 2000s, Chinese producers flooded global markets with a cheap supply. Prices collapsed. Competitors in the US, Australia, and elsewhere shut down. China consolidated the industry into state-backed giants, including China Northern Rare Earth Group. It wasn't just about mining. China built chemical separation plants, metallurgical facilities, magnet factories. Entire supply chains are clustered geographically. By the time the West realized that rare earths were critical for clean energy and advanced weapons, China wasn't just leading, it was dominating. It owned the system. It was already too late when the weapon became visible. The first major warning shot came in 2010. Following a maritime dispute with Japan, China temporarily restricted rare earth exports to Tokyo. Prices skyrocketed. Panic spread across global markets. It was a preview. Fast forward to 2023 through 2025. Amid rising tensions with the United States, Beijing imposed export controls on gallium and germanium, both of which are critical to semiconductors. It later expanded those restrictions to include several rare earth materials and magnet technologies. In April 2025, 7 additional rare earths were placed under tighter licensing requirements. Global magnet prices surged. EV manufacturers scrambled. Defense contractors raised quiet alarms. The message was unmistakable. Supply chain dependency is a vulnerability. China didn't need to ban exports entirely. Just introducing uncertainty was enough to shake global markets. Because when one country controls nearly 90% of refining capacity, even small restrictions create shockwaves. Several years ago, DFTW already warned in multiple videos that China could use rare earths as a weapon to counter Western interference. It finally came true. Washington has finally realized the scale of the problem. The response has been massive but complicated. Under the Inflation Reduction Act, hundreds of billions of dollars were allocated to rebuild domestic clean energy supply chains. That includes rare earth mining, refining, and magnet production. The Pentagon has invested directly in domestic magnet manufacturing facilities to reduce reliance on Chinese inputs. The Mountain Pass mine in California has restarted operations under new ownership. But here's the catch. The ore was still being sent to China for processing. That's how deep the dependency runs. The U.S. is now funding new processing facilities in Texas and other states to close that gap. Companies are experimenting with alternative magnet chemistries that use less dysprosium. In early 2026, the White House hosted a summit with more than 50 countries to build a global minerals alliance. The idea is simple. If you can't beat China alone, build a coalition. It is a team that admits anyone but China. Australia is a major piece of the puzzle. Companies like Lynas Rare Earths have expanded production outside China and are building processing facilities in Malaysia and Texas. Canada is investing heavily in critical mineral projects across Quebec and the Northwest Territories. The European Union passed the Critical Raw Materials Act to accelerate domestic mining approvals and reduce reliance on Chinese supply chains. Japan has invested in recycling technologies to extract rare earths from electronic waste. Meanwhile, the United States and the EU are backing infrastructure projects such as the Lobito Corridor Railway in Africa, a 1,300-kilometer route linking mineral-rich regions in Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo to ports on the Atlantic coast. This corridor is more than transportation. It's a strategic counterweight to China's Belt and Road investments across Africa. Because here's another layer. China doesn't just control domestic rare earths. It has invested heavily in African mining assets, securing long-term supply contracts and equity stakes in key projects. That isn't just geology. It's geopolitics. The hard reality is that catching up isn't easy. Building a mine can take 10 or even 15 years. In the United States, it can take even longer to obtain a permit to build a mine, let alone building it from scratch. Processing facilities require specialized chemical expertise that has largely migrated to China. The US has long criticized China for IP theft, and now it is harsh for the US to steal it from China. And even if Western companies build capacity, they face another problem: price warfare. China has previously driven global prices down to squeeze competitors. State-backed firms can now operate at lower margins for longer periods. When it comes to national security, China does not need to make a profit. Survival is its top priority. If new Western refineries come online and China floods the market, investors could panic again. Unlike China's state-run enterprises, US entrepreneurs are responsible to shareholders, not the federal or state government. To counter this, policymakers are discussing strategic stockpiles, guaranteed price floors, and long-term procurement contracts to protect domestic producers. In other words, the free market model that outsourced rare earth production in the first place may not be enough to rebuild it. Could technology change the game? There are wild cards. Researchers are developing magnet designs that reduce reliance on heavy rare earth elements such as dysprosium. Recycling rare earth magnets from end-of-life EVs and wind turbines is gaining traction. There's exploration underway in Greenland, Brazil, and Vietnam. But none of these solutions scale overnight. And none immediately breaks China's refining dominance. Even if mining diversifies, processing remains the choke point. So here's the big question. Is it already game over? Short term, China clearly holds the advantage. It has a 30-year head start. It controls the majority of refining capacity. It has vertically integrated supply chains and state backing. Medium term, the West can reduce but not eliminate dependency. Diversification is happening. Processing plants are being built. Alliances are forming. Long term, it becomes a fragmented global supply system. China will likely remain the dominant player in rare earth refining. But its market share may fall from near monopoly levels to a more balanced level. Who are the real winners, then? Countries rich in mineral deposits, such as Australia, Canada, Brazil, and parts of Africa, are becoming strategic swing suppliers and will eventually win. The real losers will be nations that fail to secure supply agreements or invest in domestic capabilities. And the geopolitical impact will be massive, as rare earths are the foundation of electric mobility, renewable energy, AI hardware, advanced military systems, and space technology, among others. Control over these inputs shapes industrial, military, and technological power. In the 20th century, oil defined geopolitics. In the 21st century, critical minerals might serve the same purpose. China understood this decades ago. The West is just now realizing it. It isn't a war fought with bombs. It's fought with permits. With chemical plants. With trade licenses. With infrastructure corridors across continents. The trillion-dollar rare earth war will determine who builds the electric cars, who controls the clean energy transition, who dominates advanced weapons systems, and who sets the terms of global supply chains. In short, it will decide who sets the world order and defines the standards. China built its position quietly. The United States and its allies are scrambling loudly. Whether it becomes the greatest comeback in industrial history, or a permanent shift in global power depends on what happens over the next decade. But one thing is certain. The future of technology isn't just about innovation. It's about who controls the materials that enable innovation. And that battle is already underway.